The Montana plains stretched endlessly under a pale blue sky, broken only by fences, grazing cattle, and a lonely ranch house standing firm against the wind. Jack Miller had built his life on that land with his own hands. Once, laughter had filled the house, his wife's voice, warm and teasing, the soft cries of newborns. But fate had been cruel. After her sudden death, Jack was left with 3 young children and a grief too heavy to speak aloud. He learned quickly that mourning did not stop the sun from rising or the cattle from needing feed. Life demanded strength, even when the heart felt hollow. Years passed. Jack became known as a quiet, dependable rancher, stern on the outside, gentle with his children. He woke before dawn, cooked simple breakfasts, braided his daughter's hair with clumsy fingers, and taught his sons how to ride before they could properly read. At night, when the children slept, loneliness crept in. Yet he never complained. His kids were his world, and he believed love meant staying, no matter how hard it got. One late afternoon, as dust swirled near the ranch gate, Jack noticed a woman walking up the dirt path. She carried a small suitcase, her dress worn but clean. There was something hesitant in her steps, as if she expected to be turned away. Jack wiped his hands on his jeans and approached cautiously. Strangers rarely came that far unless they were lost or desperate. "My name is Clara," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "I was told you might need help. I can cook, clean, work the land, anything." Jack studied her face. She wasn't weak, but life had clearly tested her. He nodded slowly. "I can offer work. Not much pay. Hard days." "I'm not afraid of hard days," Clara replied. That evening, she shared a simple meal with Jack and the children. The kids eyed her curiously, whispering questions to one another. Clara smiled politely, though her hands trembled slightly as she held her spoon. When the children were sent to bed, silence settled between the 2 adults, thick with unspoken truths. Clara took a breath. "There's something you should know," she said quietly. "I can't have children." Her words came out practiced, as if she'd said them many times before, to men who turned cold, to families who saw her as incomplete. Jack leaned back in his chair, considering her words. Memories flashed through his mind. Diapers, fevers, sleepless nights, and the fierce love that came with them. Then he smiled, not out of humor, but certainty. "Good," he said simply. "I've got enough kids for both of us." Clara stared at him, stunned. She had expected rejection, maybe pity. Instead, she saw acceptance, plain, honest, and unguarded. In that moment, something shifted inside her. For the first time in years, hope didn't feel dangerous. It felt possible. Clara's first morning on the ranch began before sunrise. The sound of boots on wooden floors, the clatter of pans, and children's voices filled the house. She woke quickly, unsure of her place, then reminded herself she was there to work. As she stepped into the kitchen, she found Jack already up, packing lunches with careful hands. The children sat at the table, half awake, their eyes darting toward her with curiosity. "Morning," Jack said simply. Clara nodded and tied her apron. Without being asked, she began helping, pouring milk, slicing bread, and brushing crumbs from the table. The children watched closely, testing her presence. Little Emily smiled shyly when Clara handed her a warm biscuit. The boys asked endless questions about where she came from and how long she would stay. Clara answered gently, though she avoided the last question. She had learned not to promise what life might take away. Days turned into routine. Clara worked alongside Jack in the fields, learned the rhythms of the ranch, and slowly found confidence in her hands. She fixed torn shirts, soothed scraped knees, and listened to bedtime stories told in Jack's rough, tired voice. At first, she reminded herself to keep her heart guarded. Loving children who were not hers felt dangerous, like borrowing joy that could be taken back at any moment. Yet the children made it impossible to stay distant. They pulled her into their world with simple trust. Emily began following her everywhere, asking if Clara would brush her hair. The boys proudly showed her their writing skills, eager for her approval. Clara felt something bloom inside her, something warm and terrifying. One evening, after the children were asleep, Clara sat on the porch, staring at the dark horizon. Jack joined her, handing her a cup of coffee. She hesitated, then spoke. "They're getting attached to me," she said quietly. "So am I." Jack nodded. "That's what families do." Clara swallowed hard. "I've been left before. I don't want to hurt them." Jack looked at her, his expression firm but kind. "They've already been hurt by losing their mother. What they need now is someone who stays. His words settled deep in her chest. For years, Clara had believed her inability to have children made her incomplete, less worthy of love. But on that ranch, surrounded by laughter and mess and responsibility, she began to see another truth. Motherhood wasn't just about giving birth. It was about choosing to care, again and again, even when fear whispered to run. Trouble came quietly, carried on the wind from town. Jack returned one day with tension in his shoulders. Clara noticed the way neighbors looked at her when they visited, curious, judgmental. Whispers followed her steps. She had heard them before, in other places, in other lives. She doesn't belong, they said. She's not their real mother. That night, doubt crept back into her heart. As the house slept, Clara packed her suitcase. She told herself leaving would protect everyone. Just as she reached the door, small footsteps sounded behind her. Emily stood there, clutching her doll. "Are you coming back?" the child asked. Clara knelt, tears filling her eyes. In that moment, she understood. She was already part of this family. And walking away would break more than her own heart. Clara stood frozen at the doorway, her suitcase still in her hand, as Emily's small question echoed in the quiet house. "Are you coming back?" The words struck deeper than any cruel whisper from town. Clara set the suitcase down slowly and knelt in front of the child, brushing a loose curl from Emily's face. "I'm not going anywhere tonight," she said softly. Emily smiled, satisfied, and padded back to her room. Clara remained there for a long moment, her heart racing. She knew then that leaving would not be an act of kindness, it would be another abandonment. Still, fear lingered. The town's judgment, her past, and her old wounds pressed heavily on her chest. The next day, the whispers grew louder. At the general store, conversations stopped when Clara entered. Some faces held pity, others suspicion. One woman muttered, "A woman who can't have her own children shouldn't be raising someone else's." Clara felt the sting but said nothing. She returned to the ranch with her head held high, determined not to let cruelty define her place. Jack noticed her silence that evening. After the children were asleep, he found her in the barn, brushing one of the horses, tears slipping down her cheeks. He didn't speak at first, just stood beside her, offering quiet presence. "They don't want me here," Clara said finally. "Maybe they're right." Jack turned to face her fully. "You think I care what they say?" His voice was low but steady. "This ranch, this family, it's mine to protect. And you belong here because I chose you." Clara looked at him, stunned. No one had ever spoken those words to her with such certainty. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "I've spent my life being told I'm not enough." Jack exhaled slowly. "When my wife died, I thought I'd never be enough for these kids. But love isn't about being perfect. It's about staying when it's hard." The following weeks tested that promise. A sudden storm destroyed part of the fence, cattle scattered, and Jack injured his arm trying to bring them back. Clara stepped in without hesitation, organizing the children, managing the ranch, and proving her strength not through words but action. She woke before dawn, worked until exhaustion, and still found time to sit with the kids at night, listening to their worries and dreams. One evening, Jack's eldest son, Noah, spoke up at the dinner table. "You're like our mom," he said plainly. The room went quiet. Clara's breath caught. She didn't want to replace anyone, didn't want to take what wasn't hers. But Jack nodded slowly. "She's part of this family," he said. Clara felt tears spill freely. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that her past did not define her future. She didn't need to give birth to be a mother. She didn't need town approval to belong. As spring neared, the ranch felt different, lighter, warmer, alive with hope. Clara unpacked her suitcase for good, placing it under the bed like a symbol of surrender. She had chosen to stay, and in doing so, she had found something she thought life had denied her forever. A family that saw her not as broken, but as home. Spring arrived on the Montana plains with a gentle warmth, painting the ranch in shades of green and gold. The cattle grazed calmly, wildflowers peeked through the fences, and the sky stretched white and endless above the house. Life at the ranch had grown steady and full, the rhythm of chores and laughter blending into a comforting harmony. Clara woke each morning to the sound of birdsong and little footsteps pattering across the floor. She no longer felt like an outsider. The house, the children, and even Jack's quiet smiles had become her home. Over the months, the family settled into a new normal. Clara had learned the quirks of each child, the way Emily twirled her hair when nervous, Noah's stubborn insistence on doing everything himself, and Luke's endless questions about horses, stars, and everything in between. Jack and Clara worked seamlessly together, their partnership unspoken but undeniable. She prepared meals while he tended the fields, yet they shared quiet moments on the porch, sipping coffee as the sun rose. Their hands often brushed, and small smiles were exchanged that said more than words ever could. One bright afternoon, Jack surprised Clara by leading her outside to the barn. "I have something to ask," he said, his voice uncharacteristically nervous. Clara's heart skipped. Jack knelt, not with a ring in his hand, but with the children gathered around, their eyes wide and expectant. He spoke simply, "Clara, you've chosen to stay. You've loved my children like your own. Will you make this family official? Will you marry me?" Clara's eyes filled with tears. She had never imagined this life, never allowed herself to hope for such acceptance. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. The children cheered, jumping up and down, throwing arms around her legs. That evening, the small house was alive with celebration, laughter, and the promise of a new chapter. Years passed, and Clara never bore children of her own, but that did not matter. The children grew strong, happy, and full of life, guided by her patience and love. Clara taught Emily to bake pies, rode horses with Noah, and read bedtime stories to Luke that made him laugh until his cheeks hurt. Jack watched silently most days, grateful for the woman who had walked into their lives and stayed through storms, judgment, and fear. Sometimes, visitors would comment on the family, marveling at their closeness. Clara would smile, remembering the first night she arrived at the ranch. When she admitted she couldn't have children, Jack didn't see a loss, he saw a heart capable of love. Together, they had built a family defined not by biology, but by choice, courage, and care. On warm spring evenings, Clara would sit on the porch, sipping coffee, listening to the children play in the yard, and feeling the quiet strength of belonging. She had found her place, not because she was perfect, but because she had chosen to stay. And that, she realized with a full heart, was everything she had ever wanted. Life on the ranch was not just a second chance, it was the home she had always dreamed of, a family she had helped create, and a love that grew stronger every day.